Magic is a game of endless strategy. At any given constructed tournament, players have a wealth of different options to choose from, depending on the legal sets, metagame texture, and personal preferences. At the highest level of competitive Magic, how you choose to attack the metagame can make all the difference between making top 8 and giving yourself a shot at the trophy versus having to watch the rest of the event from the sidelines. Even the best players to ever play the game have registered some truly horrific decks in their lifetime. Brian Kibler self-reported his very bad blue-white deck that he took to the 2004 World Championships.
Did Kibler even play?
My deck was terrible. I played really bad blue-white, and I just got smashed.
LSV played Ruby Storm in a modern event where both everyone gunned to beat Storm and Nadu was legal, and Paulo Vitor Damaderosa registered mono red at a Pro Tour where the best deck at the event main decked 4 copies of both a red-green color hoser and whose best card had protection from red. No, I did not make this up, this really happened. Every player and team, even those that consist of the best players in the world, make judgment calls based on their experience, and sometimes you're just wrong, simply another bit of variance to shake off. So why then would a professional player choose to register a deck where the most played deck in the field is your worst matchup? In fact, it goes beyond that. This is likely the worst matchup in Pro Tour Top 8 history. This is the story of one of the quirkiest, coolest, and more divisive metagame choices ever made at a Pro Tour. This is the story of Owling Mine. It's 2006 in Honolulu, and the second set of the critically acclaimed Ravnica block Guild Pact has just been released. The Pro Tour is celebrating its 10-year anniversary this year, in part by hosting a Magic tournament in the US tropical paradise for the first time ever. Pro players are renting beach houses to test at before the event starts, the set is specially themed to the locale, and Standard is shaping up to be pretty awesome. Shaking off the winter of Mirrodin and those pesky robots, Kamigawa block is still around in full, but the guild-themed Ravnica block is the standout here, finally giving more thematic names to each of Magic's 10 color pairs, and more importantly, bringing with it the best dual land Standard has ever seen since the original Alpha, Beta Unlimited lands were legal all the way back in 1995. These shock lands, as they'll become known, thanks to the fact they shock you for 2 damage if you put them into play untapped, give a vast number of options to the competitors in Honolulu, as a swath of different 2-color combinations have good mana available to them, giving players access to way more strategies. 2 and even 3-color decks are able to utilize the powerful multicolored cards of Ravnica's guilds, and the format seems wide open. The same Kamigawa standout creatures are there, alongside powerful cards like Umezawa's Jitei, Heartbeat of Spring, and Gifts Ungiven, all of which have seen some Pro Tour success in various formats since they've been legal. Even 9th edition brings reprints to the formats that lend themselves to different types of decks, as Koderb is now legal alongside a functional Tiger in Stomping Ground for the aggressive decks, while the Urzatron lands give slower, big mana strategies an option as well. Fun fact, this core set would be the last time the Tron lands were legal in Standard, which, given what they've gotten up to across Modern's history, is probably a good thing. Safe to say, whether you want to play aggro, control, midrange, or even combo, there is a deck out there for you. And you can see this pretty plainly in the top 8, with Izzet Urzatron on one side and Gruul aggro on the other, and that's just one of the 4 quarterfinal matchups. Before we talk about Owling Mine though, we need to rewind a bit and talk about maybe the most unique feature of this event: the Beach House. This is both the unofficial name of one of the biggest testing groups for this event and a literal place in Honolulu occupied by Magic players. Sensibly, a group of professional gamers thought that if an event was going to happen somewhere as nice as Hawaii, they might as well stay a little longer to test before the event. So for a full month before the event started, a bunch of PT qualified pros rented a house to draft, hang out, and try to break the Standard format. Names like Gabriel Nassif, Yelgo Vigasma, Anton Ruel, and Mark Herberholtz all crashed at the house at some point during their stay. Wizards even sent a camera crew to the place to interview the people that stayed there and do a little house tour. Not only is this a fun piece of Magic history, but the Beach House is actually relevant to the story of Owling Mine and the larger Pro Tour itself. See, when you have that many powerful spell slingers under one roof, working every single day on Constructed, they're likely going to find a good deck, and the Beach House was convinced they did one better than that. They believed they broke it.
After that, we walked right into the living room where there's a lot of brainstorming going on. They're all in the tank, trying to figure out a sideboard for the deck that we are definitely sure of that broke the format.
Not just one of them believes this, by the way. There are at least 2 instances of recorded video or text by 2 different members of the house claiming this fact. So, what was their deck? What did a month of brewing and testing lead them to? A late game leaning mid-range control deck based in green-white and centered around the power of Loxodon Hierarch and Vitu-Ghazi the City Tree, with just a splash of black to give them more removal. Figuring if they had inevitability against the other slow decks and good game with the Hierarch against aggro, then there was no base they couldn't cover, even if all they brewed up just seemed like the rock with extra steps. Shockingly, despite the resume of the brain trust behind the deck, none of the house made top 8, and the legend of Beach House Control stayed just that. They in fact did not break it. And it's not like Honolulu didn't have sweet decks. One of the breakout decks was an Orzhov toolbox deck called Ghost Dad, centered around Talawisp, an innocuous spirit from Kamigawa that could fetch up auras like Pillory of the Sleepless or Strands of Undeath, while finishing off opponents with the power of Ghost Council of Orzhova. None of these, however, are the focus of our story, which centers again around Owling Mine. So, what is Owling Mine exactly? As the clever wordplay in the name implies, the deck is a combination of Howling Mine and Ebony Owl Netsuke. On the surface, these cards seem like they don't do much of anything. While Howling Mine is a classic artifact that has been around since the game's genesis, conveniently reprinted both in 9th edition, the illegal core set for this event, but also in legendary creature form as the 2-drop Kami of the Crescent Moon, its problem is still the same. While it is a cheap card advantage engine, your opponent is the first person to get the extra card, which is a bit of a steep cost to pay. Ebony Owl Netsuke, on the other hand, has the distinction of being a card that looks like it doesn't do anything at all. Technically, it deals 4 damage when you meet the criteria, which is a 5th of your opponent's health in a regular game of Magic, but keeping your opponent at 7 cards when they can play instants and before their draw step, not after, seems like a tall order to deal any damage at all, especially when the game's innate rules have you discard down to 7 naturally at the end of your turn. Unlike, say, a Commander game where Reliquary Tower et al. Is everywhere and Group Hug is a reasonable strategy, helping your opponent hardly seems like a decent F&M strategy, let alone something you should bring to a Pro Tour. But if you were going to bring such a deck, what would you hope to play against? What deck struggles to play multiple spells a turn and often has hands full of cards anyway? Control decks, of course. Owling Mine was a house against the slower decks in the format. Gifts Ungiven base control was still a popular deck alongside Izzetron, and even the various mid-range Loxodon Hierarch and Orzhov decks don't really love this pairing either. When Owling Mine wins, it absolutely demolishes decks that can't combat it. Not only do Mines and Owls present constant pressure, but the combination of Sudden Impact and Twin Cast meant the deck often ended games in combo-like fashion, dealing 12 plus damage in one fell swoop. The rest of the deck was focused on keeping your opponent locked down or returning permanents to hand, whether one at a time with Boomerang or all at once with something like Evacuation. Remand in particular was an all-star in this archetype, acting as both a counterspell that cantripped while also contributing to your overall game plan and giving your opponent so many cards they'd choke on them. In my opinion, this is one of the coolest decks to ever grace a tournament, and one with such a unique game plan using unassuming cards that has been one of my favorite competitive Magic metagame gambits for a while. And it was a gamble. This deck might have the most polarizing matchup spread of any PT level event. At the top of the metagame breakdown for Honolulu sits a deck that you absolutely cannot beat, Zoo. 55 of the 410 players showed up with Zoo, compared to only the 15 players who decided to play Owling Mine. If you look at some of the other numbers though, it kinda makes sense why this seemed like a worthwhile pump fake. Even though Control doesn't have that much presence, if you combine the numbers of the likes of Izzetron, Greater Gifts, and Gifts Control, all of a sudden the deck looks like it's in a much better position. Sure, if you hit the aggro matchups, you get eaten alive, but if you get a little lucky, which if you want to win the Pro Tour, you're gonna have to do anyway, well, your good matchups are so good. A true glass cannon, 15 brave pros registered Howling Mine, including French legend and Hall of Famer Antoine Rouel, who went on quite the run to start his first day, clearly hitting none of his bad matchups.
I'm playing the Blue-Red Howling Mine deck. Howling Mine in French. And it's very good, except for that it can't win against Zoo or against Gruel.
At all.
At all.
Managed to dodge the bullets. Did you play any Zoo decks at all today?
No. I wouldn't be 6-1.
The best part? Anton was also someone that visited the beach house and basically switched decks after seeing the slow controlling deck his housemates allegedly broke the format with. There's metagaming and then there's whatever that is, but Anton was rewarded with a Pro Tour top 8 for his trouble and deck choice. In fact, 2 players on this deck, 2 of the 15 that brought it to Hawaii, managed to make top 8. Not bad given its metagame share and matchup spread. In order to fully appreciate what this deck did and didn't do, I think it's best to show you some of the games from the top 8. This is Tiago Chan, the other player playing on Sunday that successfully avoided Zoo enough in the Swiss to make his first ever Pro Tour top 8. You probably recognize him even if you don't know who he is, because Tiago is the face of one of the most powerful 2-drops ever printed, Snapcaster Mage, his prize for winning the last Magic Invitational in 2007. Tiago is a Portuguese former Magic Pro with a couple of top 8s in his career, and his quarterfinal matchup here is very good. The kind of good you register Owling Mine for. His opponent, Dutch player Ruud Varbenhoven, isn't on the slowest control deck ever, but he is playing a slower mid-range black-white deck, a combination that's been pretty popular all weekend long thanks to the recent release of Godless Shrine. Up 2-0 with the Owls, Game 3 is about as textbook as they come for Tiago, as we see just how bad a powerful card like Dark Confidant is against an opponent that actively wants you to draw cards and lose life. After all, they're playing 8 Howling Mines. On the draw in their final game, Tiago gets hit by a Castigate, which was the Thoughtseize of Standard before we had Thoughtseize. And Tiago shows Ruud a hand of 5 lands and 2 spells, one of which he's going to lose to the discard spell. All in all, a pretty miserable opener for Tiago. Castigate, by the way, is maybe Ruud's most important sideboard card, as it's his only way to remove a Howling Mine, clipping it out of the hand before Tiago gets it into play. Well, unfortunately, one of the 2 spells he sees isn't Howling Mine, and Tiago's garbage 5-lander finds the turn 3 mine off the top to get the game plan rolling. From there, Tiago just keeps drawing good cards, as Ruud's 3-creature wide board is small enough to get swept up by Pyroclasm, and then the Owl itself gets dropped to start winning the game. Tiago even helps out Ruud by making sure he stacks his triggers correctly.
I'll just stack this first and then his result.
This is draw, that's upkeep.
Oh, is it?
No, maybe you want to stack this one.
No, it doesn't trigger. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, brah.
After the sweeper, Ruud drops a Dark Confidant, which, as we noted earlier, isn't so good in this matchup, as losing life and adding cards to your hand are both things the Mind deck wants, but it's indicative of how few good options Ruud has here. While Tiago's life total gets low, an end-step evac fills up Ruud's hand, and unlike the aggro matchups that are abysmal because of the cheaper creatures and constant flurry of burn spells they can offer up, Black-White has no way to close out the game with direct damage. Instead, it's the Owl that's doming faces for 4 as back-to-back sudden impacts clean up the series for Tiago, who effortlessly wins his quarterfinal. With no way to interact with the deck's key pieces, and being just slow enough to not be able to pressure the deck before it gets set up, these are the types of matchups that Owling Mine has been feasting on all weekend. Imagine if the deck was an even more ponderous control deck that applied even less pressure. Those games are going to look very easy. One such fortunate pairing is where Anton Ruel finds himself in the final round of Swiss, playing against Pro Tour champion Shu Kimura on Greater Gifts, where the winner would sneak in as the 8th seed. While the series was closer than expected, it would end with a triumphant Anton Ruel joining his brother Olivier as one of the last remaining players. So what about this worst matchup in Pro Tour history? Well, that's what Antoine is about to sit down and play, because unfortunately as the 8th seed, he has to play the 1 seed, who is none other than coverage extraordinaire Craig Jones, playing Zoo. Turns out Antoine can only dodge his bad matchups for so long, and game 1 is a slaughter. Jones leads off on the play with a Stomping Ground into Curdape, a sequence that has effectively been beating players since Alpha before following it up with a 2-powered 2/2. Ruel responds with a Howling Mine, which he has to play for his deck to function, but if anything, makes it easier for Craig to keep up the pressure and close out the game. Making it 3 for 3 on creatures, playing a 3-powered 3-drop on his 3rd turn, Craig Jones curves out perfectly, something his deck has done all weekend. Antoine does find back-to-back exhaustions to keep Jones's board locked down for a little bit longer, while Pyroclasm and an Eye of Nowhere pare down the board a bit more. Unfortunately, the mighty first turn Curdape lives through it all and attacks Antoine down to 7 before a burn combo of Char and Lightning Helix take Antoine down from 7 to 0. Jones takes game 1 in a little over 5 minutes, and it would have been faster if Antoine hadn't had those exhaustions to slow down the menagerie. The later games don't get any better for Antoine either, who eschewed any decent sideboard cards against aggro in order to make his deck better against what it was made for. After all, if you can't win this matchup anyway, why dedicate sideboard cards to it if it's never going to be better than a 40% win rate? Commentator Mike Flores' thoughts on sideboarding in this matchup should tell you all you need to know.
Does Craig Jones have much in his sideboard that's relevant here? Who cares?
Game 2 sees another 1-drop powered start from Craig Jones, adding Curdape and his best buddy Isamaru to the board against Ruel's Howling Mine and Kami of the Crescent Moon, the latter of which gets shot down by a Lightning Helix after it drew Craig an extra card. Insult meet injury. Ruel does find a neat line with his Pyroclasm by boomeranging Craig's Stomping Ground in order to shrink the ape, so Pyroclasm actually sweeps the board up, but Antoine having Shivan Reefs as his only red sources this game means he's now taking damage in order to cast his red cards, which is awkward because he can't win without casting Sudden Impact, and his opponent arguably has better burn spells like Char to respond with. To Antoine's credit though, there is actually a way out of this game at least, and we can start to see it in Craig's end step when Antoine points a sudden impact at his opponent's face for 8, bringing Jones down to 11, the closest he's gotten to winning a game since this top 8 started. While Owling Mine is happy to chip away at the slow decks, against the faster decks, you end games much more like a combo deck by combining Sudden Impact with Twincast, a 2-card 6-mana combo that basically doubles the damage of your big burn spell. Given that Jones took 8 from the last one, if Antoine has the combo available to him, even if Jones has some instants to play, it's unlikely he'd be able to get under the 1-2 punch in his next draw step, and Antoine would do the impossible and actually win a game. And as we can see from the coverage, Antoine does have another Sudden Impact ready to go. All he needs is the Twincast that Craig has been fearful of for a few turns now. Has Antoine really held off the animals long enough to win one here? At 5 life, Antoine has to go for it, and given that he'll take a single point of damage off of his Wreath to do this, if Craig Jones has a chart to respond with, Antoine's just barely going to lose even if he does have the combo. But at some point, Morel just has to try it. It's not like the matchup is getting any better. So Antoine smirks, plays the impact dropping to 4, and holds priority, before casting Ancestral Recall, which is not a legal card in this format, but not even cheating can save the Frenchman from a matchup this bad. Laughing uncontrollably and having faded a potentially lethal Twincast, Craig Jones responds with the Char that locks up game 2.
Take one.
Now he takes one.
Got you.
Could be game Sudden Impact. What is that?
Ancestral Recall.
What? What is going on?
Are you dead or?
Aren't you ancestral?
Yeah. So you're at. I'm at 1.
You're dead?
I'm dead.
You brought an ancestral from the game where you got it from the front.
Antoine brought in Ancestral Recall. Is that what just happened?
Given that Antoine has decided his best chance in this matchup is to mess around and cast illegal cards, the coverage moves to a different matchup, as Jones mulligans to 4 cards in the final game and still wins easily, pushing himself into the semifinals against Antoine's brother Olivier. While it wasn't good enough to win even a single game, I'm pretty sure that makes Antoine the only player to brazenly cheat on camera at the Pro Tour and not get penalized. And this, the worst matchup in Pro Tour history.
As expected, 3-0 sweep against Antoine Ruel.
Worst matchup in the history of Pro Tour top 8s.
60 events. I don't think there's ever been a more lopsided matchup.
Thanks for watching everyone. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you want to get notified about more videos like this, you should tap that subscribe button too. Get in the comments and let me know if this is the worst matchup in Pro Tour history, or if there's one I didn't think of that's even worse. If you want to support the channel more directly, you can do so via Patreon. You can get sneak peeks at future video ideas, contribute to the monthly mailbag, and join the Patreon exclusive Discord. You can also donate via Coffee if you're looking for another way to help the channel. All these links are in the description below. If you want to learn more about the history of competitive Magic, maybe try this video too.